There's a retired couple in Scottsdale, Arizona who had $2 million on the day they retired. They now have $4 million, and they haven't touched their principal once. Their neighbor retired the same year with $3 million. He has $1.8 million left, and he's starting to panic. The difference between these two households isn't what they earned in the market. It isn't luck, it isn't timing, and it isn't a secret investment strategy. It's a list of things they stopped buying. 10 specific things. And the math on some of these will make you want to sit down. Here's where this gets genuinely strange. Most financial content focuses obsessively on what wealthy people buy. The stocks they pick, the assets they own, the strategies they run. That's the wrong lens entirely. Because if you interview enough people who retired with real money and still have it a decade later, you find a pattern that runs in the opposite direction. They are remarkable, almost startling, in what they refuse to spend money on. Staying wealthy isn't usually about making brilliant financial moves. More often, it's about avoiding expensive mistakes disguised as good ideas. And here's the part that makes this uncomfortable. Most of these 10 things are actively sold to retirees as rewards, as things you've earned, as products designed specifically for someone in your position. The salespeople targeting you at 65 are not targeting you in spite of the fact that you have money. They're targeting you because of it. Stay with me, because the 5th item on this list is the one that's going to make you genuinely angry. And I don't say that lightly. I've been investing for over a decade. I've sat in rooms with fiscal lawyers and accountants who manage generational wealth. And this particular mechanism is so well disguised that most people paying it have no idea how much it's actually costing them. But first, let me give you the framework. I want you to imagine your retirement portfolio as a bucket. You spend 30 or 40 years filling that bucket. Every paycheck, every bonus, every 401k contribution, every index fund purchase, all of it goes into the bucket. And retirement is supposed to be the moment you finally get to use it. The problem is there are holes in the bottom. Not obvious holes, not dramatic, catastrophic holes. Small, slow, invisible ones. Drilled there by people who make money every single time they drain a little bit of yours. The wealthy retirees who end up in that Scottsdale couple's position didn't just fill their bucket better than everyone else. They found the holes and they plugged them. The 10 things on this list are the 10 most common holes I've found, and they all have one thing in common. They look completely reasonable from the outside. We're going to call this the leaky bucket problem. And I'll come back to that phrase throughout this video because every single item on this list is, at its core, a hidden drain. Let me start with the second most expensive mistake on this list, because the most expensive one deserves its own buildup. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a number that's going to reframe how you think about your entire financial setup in retirement. But first, let me tell you about the one product that is structurally designed to never let you leave. There's a story I think about a lot. A guy I'll call Frank, retired teacher, 62 years old, sold his house in 2014, pocketed a nice gain, felt great about his financial future. He went on a vacation to Orlando. At the resort, he got invited to a 90-minute presentation. He came in planning to say no. He came out the owner of a timeshare. The salesperson told him he was locking in his vacation costs forever. No more hotel price volatility, a guaranteed property to pass to his kids. Frank paid $45,000 up front. His annual maintenance fee in 2014 was $900. That seemed fine, manageable. He used it 2 or 3 times over the next 8 years. Here's what Frank didn't understand. According to Ernst & Young's 2025 timeshare industry report, the average annual timeshare maintenance fee rose to $1,480 per weekly interval equivalent, a 36% increase since 2020. And that's just the average. Maintenance fees rise an average of 5 to 8% per year, doubling roughly every 9 to 12 years. By 2026, Frank's $900 maintenance fee had become over $2,000. And unlike the original purchase price, which you pay once, maintenance fees continue for the entire duration of your ownership, which in most cases is perpetual. Your heirs inherit the obligation unless specific legal steps are taken to refuse it. Read that last sentence again. You can pass your timeshare debt to your children involuntarily. This isn't a vacation property. It's a subscription service that accelerates in cost, has almost no resale value, and cannot easily be canceled. Many timeshares lose most of their value almost immediately. On top of that, owners often face annual maintenance fees that continue year after year. And there's a self-reinforcing spiral built into the model that most people never hear about. As fees rise, more owners exit. As more owners exit, remaining owners absorb a larger share of fixed costs, which drives fees higher. The owners who stay the longest often end up subsidizing the exits of everyone who left before them. This is not a real estate investment. It is a fee generation machine that happens to come with occasional access to a hotel room. Over 20 years, a $1,500 starting maintenance fee with 7% annual increases produces roughly $61,000 in cumulative costs. Over 30 years, it produces over $141,000. Frank's bucket now has a hole in it, a $140,000 hole. And he can't even find a buyer to plug it because they come with ongoing maintenance fees that tend to rise every year, limited resale value, and contracts that can be surprisingly hard to exit. The first thing wealthy retirees stop buying is any product that presents itself as a luxury asset but is actually a perpetual obligation liability dressed in a bathrobe. The timeshare is the textbook case, but the pattern extends to anything where the ownership part is theater and the fee part is the actual product. The second thing on this list is simpler and more universal. New cars. Not cars. New cars. New cars often shed about 55% of their original purchase price within the first 5 years. That is not a typo. You are not buying a depreciating asset. You are paying a premium to be the person who endures the sharpest part of the depreciation curve, so the next buyer doesn't have to. Kelley Blue Book shows the market average value of new vehicles is $49,353 as of 2026. The average monthly payment for a new car in the first quarter of 2026 was $773 per month, according to Edmunds. That's $9,276 per year, not counting insurance, maintenance, or the 20% of value that evaporates the moment you leave the lot. Carfax data shows that cars typically lose more than 10% of their value in the first month after you drive off the lot. Wealthy retirees don't stop driving. They stop absorbing depreciation curves. They buy 2- or 3-year-old vehicles with the steepest depreciation already absorbed by someone else. Overall, assuming the car is driven 15,000 miles per year, the average cost of ownership is $12,296 per year, according to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. When you own 2 vehicles and one of them is a new luxury SUV, you are pouring a significant portion of your annual retirement budget into a hole in the bottom of your bucket before you've paid a single bill. The leaky bucket principle. You can't fill fast enough if you keep ignoring the drain rate. This is where it gets really interesting. And I mean that in the most unsettling way possible. By the way, if you're finding value in this breakdown, hit subscribe. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. And the next point is the one that pays for the subscription in about 30 seconds of math. The fifth thing wealthy retirees stop paying for, and I've moved it up the list because the math is genuinely obscene, is the 1% annual fee charged by traditional financial advisors based on your assets under management. Let me explain what that actually means in dollars, because the financial advisory industry has done an extraordinary job of presenting 1% as a number so small it barely deserves mention. If you work with a financial advisor, you likely pay an advisory fee structured as a percentage of assets under management, or AUM. The industry average is roughly 1%, though fees vary widely. For a $2 million portfolio, a 1% AUM fee means $20,000 per year before any fund level costs are added. $20,000 per year. At which point, you might reasonably think, fine, but surely they're generating returns that more than cover that. According to Morningstar's semi-annual US Active Passive Barometer, just 38% of active funds both survived and outperformed the asset-weighted average of comparable passive funds in 2025. Over the 10 years through 2025, only 21% of active funds both survived and outperformed passive alternatives. 1 in 5. Just 14% of actively managed US large cap funds have beaten the S&P 500 over the past 10 years, according to Spiva. So the person managing your money is statistically most likely losing to the index. And you're paying them 1% of everything you own every year to do it. Now here's a number I promised. Consider two identical $1 million portfolios earning 7% annually. One has a 1% advisory fee, the other doesn't. The difference after 20 years, $663,000. That is the true cost of the 1% fee. Not $200,000 as the linear math would suggest, but $663,000 when you include the lost compounding. The fee doesn't just take money, it takes the money that money would have made, and it takes the money that money would have made on the money it would have made. That's how compounding fees work. Every dollar taken in fees is a dollar that can no longer grow. AUM fees compound against you. A seemingly small 1% difference in annual fees can reduce your final portfolio value by 20 to 30% over 30 years. On a $2 million retirement portfolio, that's a potential $400,000 to $600,000 quietly extracted over your retirement. That's not a market loss. That's not a bad economy. That's a structural tax on your wealth that compounds every single year silently. This does not mean every advisor is bad or that advice has no value. What it means is that wealthy retirees who preserve capital have, in large numbers, moved away from AUM-based relationships and toward either self-directed index investing or flat-fee fiduciary arrangements. They stopped paying a percentage that grows automatically as their portfolio grows for work that doesn't automatically grow alongside it. Here's the part that bridges from understanding this to actually doing something about it. Because knowing this data and having a system are two very different problems. I spent about 2 years pulling together 50 years of retirement data, actual historical performance numbers, withdrawal rate research, sequence of return studies, and the kind of analysis that lives in academic papers and actuarial reports rather than blog posts, and I turned it into a digital book called The Exit Code. 8 chapters, no filler. It's built around a mathematical framework that takes maybe someday I'll retire and turns it into a specific date. 2 sections are particularly relevant to what we've been discussing. The first is what I call the 4% trap, the reason the old withdrawal rule breaks under modern conditions and the dynamic withdrawal method that replaces it, one that adjusts based on sequence of returns risk rather than assuming the market performs on your schedule. The second is the lazy portfolio, a historical analysis of what a simple, low-cost, index-based approach has done relative to active management over 30-year windows. The results are not close. The data is not ambiguous. You can get the exit code through the link in the description for less than what you'd pay for dinner with an advisor who will probably charge you 1% of everything you own to have it. Let me introduce you to someone at this point. His name is Richard. He's fictional, a composite I built from the patterns I've read about and the math I've run, but everything I'm about to tell you about him is numerically real. Richard retired at 63 with $2.1 million. He felt great. He deserved to feel great. He'd worked as an engineer for 37 years. He had a paid-off house. He had savings. He had a financial advisor who'd been managing his money for a decade. He had a timeshare in Cabo. He had a membership at a country club outside Atlanta. He had a storage unit renting for $90 a month where he kept a boat he used maybe twice a year. I'm going to come back to Richard, because what happens to him over the next 10 years is not a tragedy. It's a math problem. And math problems have solutions. The 6th thing on this list is whole life insurance purchased as an investment. Now, I want to be precise here, because there are legitimate estate planning uses for permanent insurance, particularly when your portfolio is north of $5 million and you're managing estate tax exposure. But that's not who's being targeted by the products I'm describing. The pitch goes like this. Your loved ones are protected forever. You build cash value, tax deferred, and when you retire, you can borrow against the policy at low rate. It sounds like a product that does 3 things simultaneously. The cost for a life insurance policy that accrues cash value and has a guaranteed death benefit is on average 8 times higher than a term life policy with similar coverage. 8 times. For most people approaching or in retirement, The life insurance need is either eliminated or dramatically reduced. Your kids are adults, the mortgage is paid. You don't need a product designed to replace 30 years of income you no longer generate. Whole life insurance builds cash value, but it can take years, sometimes over a decade, before the cash value grows into a meaningful amount. Initially, most of your premiums are allocated to fees, commissions, and insurance costs. Compare this to the alternative. A term policy costs roughly $9,900 less per year than a whole life policy for the same coverage amount. That massive difference could be used to fund retirement accounts or invest for long-term growth. If the monthly premium difference, approximately $824, were invested for 30 years, the ending value would depend on the rate of return, producing outcomes ranging from roughly $800,000 to more than $1.8 million. That's the real cost of using insurance as an investment vehicle. Not just the fees on the policy, but the compounding growth you surrendered by overpaying for a product that provides it inefficiently. Now, this is where the brain does something interesting. The person who bought that whole life policy is not stupid. They often bought it from someone they trusted. And the whole life product was presented as comprehensive, as permanent, as the grown-up choice. The unsophisticated thing to do would be to buy cheap term insurance and invest the rest. The sophisticated, adult, successful person thing to do is to buy the permanent policy that does everything at once. You think complexity is the problem, but actually the problem is the incentive structure of the person selling you the complexity. Whole life carries some of the highest commissions in the financial products industry. The salesperson's incentive and your incentive are not aligned. That's the actual issue. By the way, Richard has a whole life policy. He's been paying into it for 22 years. The cash value is real, but modest. He's been told to keep it going. The seventh item on this list catches people off guard because it seems like such a small thing. Country club memberships. Most club initiation fees range from $2,000 to $100,000, and annual dues typically fall between $3,000 and $10,000 per year. The actual cost varies enormously based on the club and location, but the core issue isn't the number, it's the psychology. I'm going to golf 4 times a week. I'm retired, I'm finally going to use it. This is the premise. Here's what the data says about how often people actually use expensive memberships. A country club membership becomes the financial equivalent of a Peloton collecting laundry in the spare room. They're paying for the idea of using it more than they're actually using it. The math on an underused club membership is savage. Imagine you're paying $5,000 a year in dues, plus a $50,000 initiation fee you've already paid. If you play 20 rounds per year, your effective per round cost is $250 before you add a single cart rental, food bill, or guest fee. If you play 8 rounds, which a University of Florida study on retiree activity patterns found was closer to reality for members over 70, your per round cost is over $600. You could play the same golf on public courses for $30 to $50 a round. The membership isn't buying you access to golf. It's buying you access to a version of your identity that requires an expensive monthly proof of concept. I want to be fair. For some people, the country club is their primary social infrastructure. It keeps them moving, keeps them connected, keeps them sharp. For those people, the membership is a healthcare expenditure and a genuine quality of life investment. But one of the biggest retirement spending mistakes is continuing to pay for things simply because you've always paid for them. The question isn't whether the club is nice. The question is, what is your actual utilization rate? And what would that money compound to over 10 years if it was in the market instead? On a $5,000 annual membership, over 10 years at 7%, that's roughly $69,000. That's not nothing. That's a month's worth of serious travel or 2 years of healthcare premium cushion. Let me throw a statistic at you that should reframe this entire section. Married 65-year-olds with at least $100,000 in financial assets withdrew an average of 2.1% of their savings annually, nearly half the usual spending rate of retirees. They had the money. They weren't withdrawing it. And this is what researchers are calling the retirement consumption puzzle. These people could afford the club. They could afford the new car. They could afford the timeshare maintenance fee. They chose not to. The ones who ended up with the most money 10 years into retirement are the ones who most consistently refused to drain the bucket, even when they were technically allowed to. Now you're asking yourself, is this just frugality for its own sake? Is this just anxiety dressed up as strategy? That's the objection, and it's a legitimate one. The answer is no. It's not frugality, it's allocation. The Scottsdale couple isn't sitting at home eating ramen. They travel, they eat well, they live generously. What they don't do is spend money on things that exist primarily to perform financial success to other people. The 8th item on this list is storage units. Stay with me. 42% of baby boomers relied on storage units in 2025, according to Storage Cafe. It costs roughly $35 to $100 per month to rent a storage unit, according to Extra Space. That's up to $1,200 per year to store objects you don't use in a location you don't visit. And the psychological literature on this is actually fascinating. The longer you own something, the more you overvalue it. This is called the endowment effect. You will pay to store a kayak you haven't touched in 4 years because owning it is part of how you see yourself. Meanwhile, that kayak is costing you around $900 a year in storage fees and could be sold for $1,500 on Facebook Marketplace today. Wealthy retirees treat this as a very simple audit. They ask, if I didn't already own this, would I spend money to acquire it right now? If the answer is no, they sell it or donate it and cancel the storage unit. This frees capital and, just as importantly, frees cognitive space. There's a growing body of research linking excess physical possessions to elevated cortisol levels. The stuff you're storing is quietly stressing you out while quietly costing you money. The 9th item is the gadget treadmill. A new phone every 2 years, the latest laptop, the updated smartwatch, the television that costs $4,000 because it has features you will set up once and never use again. For 2026, the USDA projects grocery price increases of about 2.5%, bringing the overall increase to roughly 29.7% over 6 years. The point is this: inflation is real and compounding, while the practical upgrade you get from a $3,000 television versus a $900 television is marginal. Wealthy retirees are almost universally described as having a strange relationship with consumer electronics. They use things until they genuinely fail. They are not early adopters. They find this entirely rational. I would have bought this phone anyway. This is what you tell yourself. But you would have bought a 3-generation-old version of this phone for $350 instead of $900 if you just waited 18 months. The tech industry has engineered psychological urgency around products that improve incrementally. The wealthy opt out of that urgency cycle. The 10th item ties everything together, and it's less about a specific product than a category of spending that wealthy retirees almost universally restructure in retirement. Subscriptions and recurring fees they don't actively audit. This is the quiet one. Every month, something like $17 to $23 leaves your account for a streaming service you haven't opened in 6 weeks, $8 for a magazine you never read, $31 for a software subscription that auto-renewed a year ago and you haven't used since, $12 for a cloud storage upgrade you needed once. The average American household, according to research from C+R Research, had 4 active subscription services they had completely forgotten about. For retirees, this compounds because retirement is often the moment when the subscriptions that made sense professionally no longer do, but nobody cancels them. This isn't about $17. It's about the system. Wealthy retirees treat every recurring charge as guilty until proven innocent. Every year, they run an audit. They look at every automatic payment leaving their accounts and evaluate it the same way they'd evaluate a new purchase. If this weren't already set up, would I choose to start it today? Most of the time, the answer is no. And this habit of active auditing creates a financial friction that prevents the slow accumulation of charges that individually seem trivial but collectively add up to real money. Let me bring Richard back, because now I can tell you the rest of his story. Richard, at 63, had $2.1 million and 10 leaks in his bucket. The timeshare was costing him roughly $2,300 per year in maintenance fees, plus special assessments and growing. His financial advisor was charging him 1% AUM on $2.1 million. That's $21,000 per year. His country club was $8,000 per year. His storage unit was $960 per year. His whole life policy was costing him roughly $400 per month, an overpayment versus an equivalent term policy plus invested difference. His new car habit was depreciating roughly $12,000 in value per year, and his subscription drift was running him about $900 annually in charges he never consciously approved. Total annual drain from leaky bucket items, approximately $48,000 per year. At 65, Richard did an audit. He exited the timeshare through a legal exit program. He moved his portfolio to a flat fee fiduciary and a portfolio of low-cost index funds. He canceled the club membership and started playing at 2 public courses he enjoyed more. He sold the boat and canceled the storage unit. He converted the whole life policy in a tax-efficient exchange. He audited his subscriptions. He kept the new car habit, one concession he allowed himself, but bought certified pre-owned instead of new, saving roughly $9,000 to $12,000 on the depreciation hit at purchase. He redirected $38,000 per year back into his portfolio. At 7% annual return over 10 years, that $38,000 per year becomes approximately $524,000 in additional portfolio value. Not through better stock picks, not through exotic strategies, through plugging the holes. There's a version of Richard who doesn't do any of this. He keeps the advisor, he keeps paying the timeshare, he never audits the subscriptions, he buys a new car in 3 years, he keeps the club, and at 75, he has roughly $1.6 million left with no clear sense of where the rest went. The market performed fine. The bucket just leaked. But I have enough money to afford these things. This is the exact thought that separates the two outcomes. One thing that's consistent among financially successful retirees is that they rarely focus on looking wealthy. Instead, they focus on staying wealthy. That's a very different mindset. Affordability is not the question. The question is opportunity cost. Every dollar that exits the bucket through a structural drain is a dollar that cannot compound, and in retirement, compounding is the mechanism that makes your money last. Even after grinding and gathering wealth for decades, retirees feel unprepared for the jobless years looming ahead and continue to protect what money they have rather than assume they can spend freely. The data-driven ones, the ones who've studied this, aren't being anxious. They're being precise. Here are 3 takeaways that are specific to this topic, not generic financial advice you've heard before. First, run a leak audit right now. Pull up your bank statements for the last 60 days and mark every recurring charge. Separate them into 2 columns, things you would consciously choose to start today and things you're paying for because you never stopped. The second column is your first set of budget cuts, and it will cost you nothing in quality of life because you aren't using those things anyway. Second, if you're working with an AUM-based advisor on a portfolio above $500,000, ask for a fee-only fiduciary consultation this year as a comparison. Not to fire your advisor just to get a second opinion with a transparent dollar cost. What you find might be the most valuable 90-minute meeting you have this year, and the fee for that meeting will be a flat rate, not a percentage of everything you've built. Third, apply the perpetual obligation test to every major purchase. Not, can I afford this, but am I committing to a rising, uncappable annual cost in exchange for this? Timeshares fail this test. High-fee insurance products often fail it. AUM-based advisory relationships fail it once your portfolio is large enough. The products that pass the test are the ones that don't compound against you. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the guy telling you the opposite is usually the one selling the crypto. Is less than, sight is greater than. Sources referenced in this video: Prudential Financial, PGIM DC Solutions, Retirement Survey via Fortune, 2025. Ernst & Young LLP, 2025. Timeshare Industry Report via National Law Review and Vacation Ownership Consultants. Kelly Blue Book Vehicle Pricing Data, 2026. IC Car's Depreciation Analysis of 950,000 plus vehicles. Morningstar US Active Passive Barometer Year End, 2025. SPIVA US scorecard, 20-year data through 2025 via IFA and CNBC. Federal Reserve 2022, survey of consumer finances analyzed by DQYDJ. The Zebra Life Insurance statistics. Evergreen Wealth Management AUM fee analysis. Bureau of Transportation statistics. Vehicle ownership cost data 2024. Storage Cafe 2025. Storage unit usage data. USDA grocery price projections 2026. First Citizens Beyond Wealth report 2025 is less than. Cite is greater than.